Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
My father chose my stepsister over me and emptied my college fund. What I discovered 7 years later left me speechless. It all started at a family meal with my dad, his new wife Cecilia, and her daughter Dawn. My father cleared his throat to tell me something important, but Cecilia didn't let him finish. She explained that they needed my room for her daughter Dawn and her partner Ronan because they were going to have a baby. That bedroom meant my whole life. Mom and I painted the walls when I was 10. All my memories were in those 4 walls. I tried to respond calmly. I reminded them that I had contributed financially for 2 years while I was studying at university. I paid rent, helped with the utilities, and even bought food occasionally. Cecilia flushed with anger. She banged the table hard, making the plates jump, and got up so abruptly that her chair fell backwards. Dad remained motionless, staring at his food without saying a word. Dawn smiled slightly. I realized that she already knew everything. They must have planned this conversation before dinner. I must explain my family situation. My mother died when I was 12. She was the kind of mom who left little surprise notes in my lunchboxes and never missed my baseball games. After her death, Dad was devastated. He buried himself in his work as a lawyer and hardly saw me. A year later, he met Cecilia at a work event, and they were married within a year. Dawn moved in with us. Suddenly, I had a new family, whether I liked it or not. At first, everything seemed to work out. Cecilia tried to create a welcoming family atmosphere, decorating the house and preparing big Sunday dinners. But that phase didn't last long. She started to demand more and more for her daughter, and I was the only obstacle. She kept mentioning that I was old enough to live on my own, that my presence prevented Dawn from enjoying the life she deserved, that I was a financial burden, even though Dad earned well in his law firm. And I wasn't a bad kid. I studied hard and got good grades. Even at 16, I got a part-time job at the local supermarket and started contributing financially, although it wasn't my obligation. Far from improving the situation, everything got worse, especially with Cecilia. She would search my room during my school hours, claiming she was cleaning, but really looking for reasons to complain. She would turn off the hot water while I was showering, saying I was wasting it. She would even schedule family dinners when she knew I was working, and then complain to Dad about my absence at family moments. That night, when I tried to reason by mentioning my financial contributions, Cecilia completely lost control. I looked at Dad, hoping for his support, for him to act like my father. But he didn't even look at me. He kept looking at his plate because he agreed with Cecilia, but he didn't want to tell me directly. I explained that I was still studying, I had 2 years left until graduation, I had paid my share on time, and that it was my home too. But Cecilia ignored my words. She interrupted me, saying that I had until the next morning to pack up and leave. Then I lost my temper. I got up too. I asked them where they expected me to go in the middle of the semester. Cecilia replied that it wasn't her problem. Dawn intervened, saying that everything had arisen because of something positive like her motherhood, and that I was overshadowing it. She wanted my room because it was bigger, while hers had always been small. It had been like that since they arrived, because I had my space and I wasn't going to give it up. Perhaps that explains why they had both resented me all these years. I asked Dad if he was serious, if I really should find somewhere else. He just replied that it would be better if I found my own place, because Dawn needed more space for her baby and her boyfriend. I couldn't help myself and reminded him of the promise he made to my dying mother. I was there when he took her hand and swore to always look after me. I could see he felt some guilt, but Cecilia intervened, shouting that he shouldn't mention Dad's ex-wife, that as well as being spoiled for not giving up my room, he was trying to make them jealous. Since this morning, I've been living in my car, parked behind the university library. Today I skipped classes trying to resolve my situation. My whole life is inside my 2008 Honda Civic, what I could transport. I spent hours calling everyone I know. Mom's sister hung up as soon as I explained my situation. My uncle said I should grow up and stop causing trouble. My grandparents claim to be too old to deal with family dramas. Nobody wants to help me. I have few friends because I have dedicated my time to work and study. The few I have live in university residences or with their parents. I have some savings from my job, but they won't get me very far. I work in a local supermarket, earning just enough for my expenses and tuition. The worst thing is that Dawn doesn't even need my room. Cecilia insists that they need 2 spaces, one for the baby's room and another for Dawn and Ronan. It's just an excuse to get rid of me, and everyone knows it. Besides, couldn't Dawn and Ronan get their own house with as many rooms as they need? I'm writing from my car using the library's Wi-Fi, which barely reaches here. I had to leave a lot of my belongings behind because they didn't fit in the car. When I tried to go back for the rest, Cecilia had already changed the locks. Dad sent me a message saying I could pick up my things when they were home, but only if I avoided arguments. I can't believe Dad chose his stepdaughter over his own son. I don't know what to do. I have to work tomorrow and I don't even have anywhere to shower. Update 1. Living in a car is worse than I imagined. These 2 weeks have been complete hell. After my last post, I spent 3 days desperately calling all the relatives I could think of. Each call was more humiliating than the last. Dad's brother literally laughed when I told him about my situation. He said something about how this generation expects everything to be handed to them on a plate, and then he said that I was old enough to solve my own problems. Ironically, this guy lived with my grandparents until he was 35. I even contacted Mom's best friend, who was like a second mother to me. She would take me for ice cream when Mom got sick and let me cry in her car where Dad couldn't see me. But when I called her, she just kept saying she couldn't get involved because her real estate business depended on referrals from Dad's law firm. It seems that money is worth more than the boy she used to call her extra son. Finally, I had to find another place to sleep as I couldn't stay indefinitely near the library. I ended up in a Walmart parking lot, afraid to sleep because of the insecurity at night. Any noise startled me. I have moved between different parking lots to avoid being discovered by security, the library during the day to use the internet, a 24-hour gym to shower in the mornings, and occasionally the park when I need peace and quiet to study. My grades have dropped dramatically. I got a 52 on my economics exam because I couldn't concentrate, thinking more about where I would sleep that night than about economic concepts. My calculus teacher spoke to me after class, asking if I was okay because I fell asleep during his explanation. I couldn't tell him that I was exhausted from staying awake all night, watching suspicious people around my car. I got a second job in a 24-hour restaurant near the campus. The pay is terrible and the manager is unbearable, but they let us eat canceled orders and I need the money for the deposit on an apartment. But something positive finally happened there. I met Drake, another waiter. He noticed that I always took on extra shifts and stayed late eating leftovers. One quiet night, he asked me my story, and I ended up telling him everything. It turns out that Drake lost his parents in a car accident last year. He lives in a small caravan and works full-time while saving for technical studies. Hearing about my situation, he offered to share his rent, saying he could use help with the expenses. It's the first kind gesture I've received since this nightmare began. Last weekend, I went back home for my remaining belongings. It was a living hell. Cecilia followed me around constantly, as if she was going to take something away from me that I no longer cared about. The most painful thing was seeing Dawn in my old room with Pinterest ideas and paint samples, planning the baby's room. She pointed to the wall that Mom and I painted when I was 10, talking about creating a cloud design. Dad was at home, but he acted like a ghost, passing by me as if he were invisible. Mrs. Chen, our neighbor, stopped me as I was loading the last box into my car. She had lived there since before Mom passed away and always brought me leftovers when she made dumplings. She gave me a bowl of dumplings and her phone number, telling me to call her if I needed anything. Tomorrow I'm moving into Drake's caravan. It's small and in a dangerous area, but anything is better than living in my car. I had to drop 2 subjects because I can't handle a full load while working 2 jobs. The restaurant barely covers my share of the caravan rent, and I need the supermarket job for food and petrol. But I won't give up on my studies, even if it takes me longer to complete them. Dad hasn't called me once to check if I'm okay. The only communication received was a message from Cecilia demanding that I change my postal address because my university letters were filling her mailbox. She ended the message with a smiley emoji. I didn't reply. Update 2. My life has fallen into a difficult routine. I continue to live with Drake in his caravan, working 2 jobs, and somehow managing to continue studying part-time at university. It's like keeping afloat without completely sinking, but at least I'm not drowning. The caravan's heating broke down last week, and the owner refuses to repair it, so we sleep in several layers of clothing. When I think it's bad, I imagine what it would be like to sleep in the car in this cold. Drake teaches me to cook with inexpensive ingredients. It's surprising how many different meals can be made with rice and beans, but something happened last week that rocked my world again. I was restocking shelves at the supermarket when I saw Margaret, Dad's secretary for 15 years. She's known me since I was a child. I used to keep sweets on her desk for when Dad would take me to the office. I think I have stories like that with everyone, as people tried to spoil me because of my mother's situation. When she saw me, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. She tried to leave quickly, almost running down the cereal aisle, but she stopped, turned, and came back. She looked nervous, looking around as if afraid that someone would see her talking to me. Then she dropped a bombshell that made everything worse. Dawn was never pregnant. And worst of all, Dad knew it. He knew I'd been kicked out, and Dawn wasn't even expecting a baby. They were just trying to conceive. I was expelled simply as a precaution, so that everything would be ready when they succeeded. I felt nauseous in the middle of the shift. I couldn't help it and sent a message to Dad. I asked him how he could have made me homeless knowing that Dawn had lied. His reply infuriated me. He said it didn't matter because Dawn and Ronan were trying to have a baby anyway, so they still needed the space. He added that I was exaggerating about being homeless because I could have found a flat if I really wanted to. As if I had the money to pay first month's rent, last month's rent, and deposit while trying to pay for university, food, and heating all at the same time. And I don't even pay full tuition. I get help from the fund that Mom set up. From the time I was born, she set up a college fund by saving monthly, even during her illness. She could have covered all my expenses, but she passed away before saving enough. I should clarify that this money can only be used specifically for college expenses, but it was much better than nothing, and with my part-time job, it was enough. I could cover the rest of the university fees, buy food, and pay a token rent to Dad. But when I tried to withdraw funds for the university, the account was empty. I visited the bank where they informed me that it had been emptied days before. Dad, as a trustee, had access. The bank employee was very kind. After listening to my story, she checked the records and informed me that Dad had transferred everything to a new account. She couldn't reveal the exact destination of the money, but she hinted that shortly afterwards large payments were made to furniture stores and a contractor. They used my college fund, the money that my dying mother saved for me, probably to renovate my old room for Dawn and Ronan's non-existent baby. Drake suggests suing Dad for misuse of the trust fund. She even found a legal aid office that might be able to help. But honestly, even if I do end up doing that, it just adds to my long list of current worries. I can hardly keep my eyes open most days. It's not that I won't, but what else can happen to me now? Yesterday, I did something reckless. I drove to my old house. There is a huge container at the entrance, and construction vehicles parked outside. Through the window, I saw that they had demolished my old room. The walls that Mom and I painted together are probably in that container now. I stayed in my car for almost an hour, just looking at the house, remembering when Mom and I used to bake cookies in that kitchen, or do jigsaw puzzles in the living room. It doesn't even feel like my home anymore. Today, the supermarket manager found me crying in the warehouse during my shift. Instead of getting angry, he sat down with me and listened to my whole story. He is offering me more hours and transferring me to the day shift so that I can take more night shifts at the restaurant. It's not much, but it will help. For now, I just concentrate on surviving, keeping a low profile, working, studying when I can. Sometimes I don't want to wake up, feeling that something new and negative will come along, but if I don't make an effort, nobody will do it for me. Update 3. It's funny how life works. I never imagined updating this post again, but something happened yesterday that brought it all back to me. These 7 years have been transformative. I graduated from university. It took me 5 years instead of 4, but it's better than all the possibilities I contemplated while sleeping in my car. I got a good job that allows me to live on one income. I married a girl I met in my last year of college. She was a barista at the coffee shop where I studied between shifts. We bought a house last year, something unthinkable when I was sleeping in my vehicle. I finally sued my father shortly after my last update, although I barely had the energy to call a lawyer. I eventually got my money back, which prevented it from taking 8 years instead of 5. Drake also thrives. He finished his technical training and now has his own air conditioning business. He was best man at my wedding. It's ironic how the worst moment of my life allowed me to meet one of my best friends. Over time, I obtained information about my family from former neighbors. Dawn did indeed get pregnant, this time for real, and had twins. Mrs. Chen told me that they completely renovated the house, turning the guest room into a playroom and my old room into a children's room. She also mentioned that Dad had aged considerably, neglected the garden, and only went out to work. And then, yesterday, Dad called from an unknown number. He was crying, something I only saw at Mom's funeral. Between sobs, he told me he needed help. Apparently, after my lawsuit, they mortgaged the house to finance all the renovations. Then Dad fell ill with depression and was laid off, forcing him to take a lower-paying lawyer job. Finally, they sold the house, and Dawn and Ronan disappeared with their twins. It happened while Dad was at work. They took what they considered theirs, and they have not been in touch since. No note, no explanation, nothing. They even emptied the joint account that Dad shared with Cecilia, where he had deposited considerable money. Cecilia had taken on Dawn years before to help with household expenses. Cecilia apparently suffered a complete breakdown when she found out what had happened. She packed her bags and moved in with her sister in Florida, leaving Dad to live alone in his new residence. Finally, Dad suffered a heart attack when he arrived at his new home and was discovered by a neighbor who called an ambulance. He is now hospitalized, living in a rented place, with no savings and no way to pay his medical bills. He kept apologizing through his tears, saying that he should never have chosen them over me, that he failed as a father, that he regrets everything. He told me how proud he was to learn of my achievements through old friends. He confessed that he occasionally drove by my house just to check on me, but never had the courage to knock on the door. Then he asked if he could stay with me during his recovery. He said I was his only hope. The irony of him now being homeless does not escape me. Part of me wants to explain exactly how he feels, and the other part has already told him. I replied that he could look for several jobs, grow up, and sleep in his car to save money. Call me vindictive, but I don't owe that hospitalized person anything. 7 years ago, I was desperate for help, and he turned his back on me. Now he is in the exact same position, asking for the same compassion he denied me. When I was young and destitute, he didn't help me. But now that I am old and penniless, he asks for my help. The irony is absolutely perfect. Update 4. I have consulted with different people about whether my decision was the right one. My wife, being compassionate, initially suggested taking him into our spare room. But the more we discussed it, the more we realized, especially she, that it was a terrible idea. Drake only remembered those nights in the caravan or in my car. Everything confirms that helping Dad is the worst thing I can do now. Even the comments support that I made the best possible decision. There will always be some father who mistreated his son and identifies with my story, which is why he says I should help him, considering myself ungrateful, but fortunately, there are not many fathers like that. There will be no family dinners, no emotional support, no attempts to rebuild our relationship. He made his decision 7 years ago when he saw me packing my car and leaving, and I made a decision that has matured over 7 years. Yesterday, I received a long email from Cecilia. She is still in Florida with her sister. She wrote saying that I should forgive my father, that he is a broken man, that Dawn manipulated them both. She had the audacity to claim that they expelled me because they really believed I would make it, that they knew I was strong enough to become independent. I did not reply. My wife asked if I was sure about my decision, not to change my mind, but to avoid future regrets. I showed her something I have kept all these years, my mother's last birthday card. Inside, she wrote about how proud she was of my big heart, but she reminded me that being kind doesn't mean letting others hurt me. She wanted me to be strong, to stand up for myself, to know my worth. I don't think I'm being cruel by not helping someone in hospital. If it were my father, maybe I would. But that person died 7 years ago, stirring his plate with a blank stare and not saying a word. Only someone who has slept in their car, startled by any noise, afraid that someone will break the window to rob them, understands my experience. They would also understand how I waited for a call to go home and get my life back. That call never came. I am at peace with my decision. Edit. For those who ask about Dawn, nobody knows, although I always think that they can't have got far, as none of them seemed ready for life. They probably sleep in someone else's house, all crammed in, because they will never get a place as good as Dad's house, I'm completely sure. They wanted my room for a reason, because it was the best they could achieve in life. Even my existence seems fortunate compared to what awaits those twins, who truly have inadequate parents. I don't have much of an opinion about Cecilia. She never spoke well of her sister or her lifestyle. Judging by her criticism, her house is probably worse than the caravan I shared with Drake for so long. That makes me wonder what Dad's current home is like. How deplorable must it be for Cecilia to have abandoned him? In the end, I think that everyone gets what they give. If you are selfish, unpleasant, and evil, sooner or later life puts you where you deserve to be, and that is exactly what they are all experiencing now. Update 5. My father suffered his third and final heart attack, which ended his life. In the 4 years since, he had a second attack, which I did not mention because there was nothing relevant to communicate, and then this last one. An end without reconciliation, without making peace, although not because he didn't want to. Some people think I held a grudge for many years, but that wasn't the case. I simply prioritized other aspects, my friendships, my wife, my children. In my ideal life, there was never room again for the man I once called father. I didn't even attend his funeral, nor did Dawn or Cecilia, as far as I know. During this time, I have known little about them, but what little I have discovered confirms my suspicions. Their best time in life was while they lived with Dad, but they squeezed everything they could out of him, and now they can't find another victim to parasitize. That's why they live miserably, where they should have always been. They were lucky that someone considered them good people, that someone was naive enough, but that person no longer exists, and for some time now they have lacked resources, so for them, they lost all value. Don't interpret this update as sad for me. My life couldn't be better. But the nature of the consequences for those who wronged me is, and that is the tone of this update.